So, why does everyone hate Paul? If you don't know who Paul is, then I'm here to clue you in so you can join the hate train. Everyone hates Paul with a passion, and I want to discuss it. With the trailers for Spider-Man Brand New Day out, everyone and their mother saw this little thing snuggling up to MJ. Now, we don't know if this is actually Paul, but I like to think it is. Do I hate Paul in the comics? Absolutely. Do I also want the opportunity to hate him in live action? Also, absolutely. In order for this to make sense, I'm going to tell you Paul's full history. Now, I usually go into every character breakdown with the idea that this is someone's favorite character, so I try not to bash and I try to be fair. This will not be the case today. Something to know about Paul is that he has no powers, no heroic anything that would make him stand out in the least. He is the most boring character. He has the personality of an old dish rag, basically a stale ham sandwich of a human being. So, with that being said, let's just get right into it. Paul was the son of Benjamin Rabin, a man whose hobbies included studying reality-breaking mathematics and accidentally helping destroy an entire Earth. While Paul and a bunch of fellow math enthusiasts were uncovering what were basically cosmic cheat codes disguised as ancient symbols, Daddy Rabin was out making deals with Way Up and turning planetary annihilation into a career opportunity. Paul looked at his father and concluded, yeah, this guy blows. He solved the problem with the good old-fashioned comic book way, patricide. After spending what felt like several geological epochs surviving on a dead world, Paul ran into Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson, who had been stranded there thanks to Rabin's nonsense. Peter built a machine to get everyone home. Way Up attacked. MJ used the machine. Way Up died. Peter got sent back, and somehow Paul ended up being the one stranded with MJ. Because Spider-Man's luck is less of a character trait and more of a legally recognized disability at this point. While really no time passed on Earth 616 where Peter Parker was, 4 years passed for Paul and MJ. During those years, they fought monsters, avoided Rabin, adopted 2 kids named Owen and Stephanie, and basically played post-apocalyptic family simulator. If you're new to this story, do not get attached to the kids. Paul also invented a device that randomly granted MJ superpowers because apparently unpredictable supernatural abilities sounded safer than just giving her pepper spray. This is when she takes up the mantle as Jackpot, which I actually didn't mind. But, I've been an MJ hater from the beginning. I don't know. When they finally returned to Earth 616, Peter learned that Paul's backstory made absolutely no sense. Paul then revealed that he was actually Rabin's son. Peter reacted about as well as you'd expect. Paul punched him, explained he hated his father and that's why he had to kill him, and MJ defended Paul because apparently Peter's emotional suffering quota had not been met yet. She even says that Paul hiding his background is the exact same as Peter hiding his Spider-Man identity. The audacity. Paul and MJ continued raising Owen and Stephanie while Paul mostly occupied Peter's peripheral vision. To be fair, he occasionally helped Peter financially and even tried being friendly. But to be even more fair, that made him more irritating. I don't know why. Then came the demons, the goblins, the magical disasters, and the usual assortment of Spider-Man catastrophes. Through it all, Paul mostly specialized in taking the children somewhere safe, while Peter and MJ handled the actual superhero work. Unfortunately, Owen and Stephanie eventually turned out to be magical constructs tied to Rabin's spell work and were erased from existence, leaving Paul and MJ absolutely devastated. The two tried to move forward while dealing with family drama, supervillains, relationship issues, and roughly 17 separate apocalypses. Paul became MJ's guy in a chair while she operated as Jackpot, helping with investigations and occasionally getting kidnapped because that's apparently included in the superhero benefits package. Over time, Paul and Peter slowly became less hostile toward one another. They even went on double dates at one point, which remains one of the strangest developments in Spider-Man history. And there's a lot of weird stuff in there. And somehow, despite all this, Paul still had the personality of the color beige. Then things got worse. But, don't they always? MJ's Jackpot device nearly killed her, forcing her to bond with the Venom symbiote. Paul discovered that his invention had accidentally transformed his girlfriend into Venom and that she'd been keeping it secret from him. Their relationship, which was already being held together by cosmic duct tape and wishful thinking, finally collapsed. MJ broke up with him, and Paul accepted it with remarkable maturity. This is not because of how mature he was as a person, but how bland he is as a person. Even when facing heartache, God forbid he shows any emotion or does anything remarkably interesting. Afterward, Paul moved out, immediately lost his new apartment in an explosion, continued helping MJ and Dylan Brock, who is Eddie Brock's son, and spent most of his remaining time trying to be a decent foster parent while everyone around him treated him like decorative furniture, which is fair. Then there was the absolutely hilarious blind date with Power Girl. This has nothing to do with Spider-Man, but I think it's worth noting, and plus Gail Simone wrote it, and she's fantastic and should always get praise. For reasons known only to editorial offices and divine beings, Paul somehow ended up on a blind date with Power Girl. She did not vibe with him at all. The entire story basically became an extended roast session focused on Paul's man bun and general Paulness. Meanwhile, the Punisher swooped in, charmed Power Girl, got carried off by her into the night, and left Paul wondering how he lost a competition he wasn't even aware he was participating in. Then came Torment. A serial killer named Torment targeted Dylan Brock and those close to him. Paul, a man with no powers, no combat training worth mentioning, and a life record that looked like a disaster report, decided to stand between Torment and Dylan anyway. Knowing he couldn't win, Paul argued that if Torment was targeting family members, then he technically qualified and should be killed too. It was a desperate distraction, but it worked. Dylan got enough time to survive. Spider-Man and Venom arrived. Paul did not. Was it heroic? Yeah, absolutely. Do I still think it was kind of stupid? Also, absolutely. But for the first time in his existence, Paul wasn't standing around being MJ's boyfriend or participating in a mystery box subplot. He was making a choice, a genuinely selfless one. Paul died doing the most unexpectedly heroic thing he'd ever done, and no one thought it would happen with Paul. At his funeral, MJ, Peter, Dylan, and everyone who knew him mourned him. Even people who spent years wondering why Paul existed in the first place had to admit that despite all the bizarre writing decisions, multiversal baggage, and overwhelming Paulness of it all, he genuinely tried to do the right thing. Now, that's the story of Paul, but what is the problem with Paul, besides the things I already mentioned? Paul is basically the poster child for Marvel's refusal to let Peter Parker be happy for longer than 15 consecutive minutes. Whether you like MJ or not, and honestly, like I said, I've never been a biggest MJ fan myself, the whole thing felt less like a natural story and more like an editorial policy manifesting itself into human form. The wildest part is that Marvel never really explained why MJ and Paul got together, so it just kind of happened. It happened almost entirely during a time skip. Before all of this, Peter and MJ were together. Then MJ got stranded in an alternate dimension for years, met Paul, who also was from another dimension because apparently one alternate reality just was not enough. And when readers checked back in, they were suddenly a couple. That's basically the entire romance. What's even funnier is that Paul originally existed as one giant mystery box. Zeb Wells started his run by skipping ahead from the previous story, where Peter and MJ finally reunited. Readers opened the new issue and immediately discovered that MJ hated Peter, and she was living with some random guy named Paul, and there were 2 children involved, and even the Avengers acted like Peter had committed some kind of war crime. The comic spent ages teasing answers. Fans expected some massive reveal that would justify all the confusion. Instead, every answer landed somewhere between "that's it" and "wait, that's the explanation?" Most of the mystery just turned Peter's friends into complete jerks for no particular compelling reason. And that's ultimately Paul's biggest problem. Once all the mystery boxes were opened, there wasn't actually much of a character underneath. The mystery was the character. After all the reveals, Paul mostly boiled down to MJ's boyfriend. He never developed a compelling rivalry with Peter. He never got a particularly strong independent storyline. He never brought anything unique to the table. He's essentially a placeholder character who somehow became permanent. So Paul spent years just existing. A character introduced as the answer to a mystery nobody liked, whose primary role was just to date MJ, who somehow managed to be less interesting than the questions readers were asking about him. And the thing is, Spider-Man fans aren't new to writers wanting misery for our favorite wall climber. We've always said that no one hates Spider-Man more than the writers. So if you're going to drop a bomb in the middle of Spider-Man's happiness, why wouldn't you do it with someone interesting? Someone we can have an emotional reaction to rather than someone with the personality of a cardboard box. Essentially, Paul is Michael Scott's Toby in The Office. And when his story ended with a heroic sacrifice that felt less like the culmination of a character arc, more like the classic comic book trope of anyone can be a hero. Which, sure, it's a nice message, but if you have to sacrifice yourself for the audience to find you even the least bit interesting, you're kind of garbage as a character. So yeah, that's Paul. These are my reasons for not liking him, and I feel like many people would agree. If you have different reasons, please let me know in the comments, because I'm more than happy to go on this hate train even farther. So with that being said, have a marvelous day.